Kerfuffle are proud to present Julian O'Dell, a man with a plan.
Hello everybody and welcome here today. I am tremendously excited to an exclusive of Kerfuffle here. We have done it, haven't we, Julian? The two most sartorially brilliant dressed people in the industry have finally made the magic happen. The Thriller in Manila. Here we are. Look at this. Absolutely perfect. With your own catchphrase in the very top hand corner. Marvellous. Mr.
Absolutely.
Julian O'Dell, welcome here to the Kerfuffle platform. How the devil are you, sir?
Thank you for having me, Mr. Whale. You're looking pretty in pink as always. I thought I'd try and blend in. So yeah, I'm good. I'm very, very good. Bunkered down at home as I have been now for 10 months.
I'm broadcasting here today from Newcastle, as you can see. So
I can see you've got your patio doors open. Yeah, very nice too. I'm any human interaction with anyone other than my wife is very welcome. So yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
Excellent. Well, I couldn't be happier. Obviously, we've known each other many years since you shamelessly beat me to a Supplier of the Year at Sunday Times, and
Yeah.
I've never stopped going on about it.
It's on the wall, literally just over there. I can see it. I nearly hung it behind me. I thought that might upset you.
I'll never forget the day there, Julian. There, Peter Fenwick. We got a bronze, silver. This is ours, Peter. This is ours. Get your jacket on. Julian O'Dell and TM. Anyway, well, look, if you can't beat them, join them, aren't you? And as I said, we're really couldn't be any more pleased, Julian, to be teaming up with you.
Likewise.
One of the real things I think we both have a commitment, obviously, to training and development, and you practiced and preached it, whereas I just kind of bullshit my way through a little bit. But the thing that I find a little bit frustrating in this industry is that there's a lot of people that talk the talk, isn't there? And we've spoke about this endlessly about how important training is and training and development and everything else, and simply. The actions don't match the words, do they? A lot of the time, and we have looked at the reasons why that happens. And actually, things like we're in the middle of lockdown. These are lockdown lessons we're looking at today. And at the very time, often you actually need to have your staff at the very best, pivoting with a new marketplace. Often that's the time when, really frustratingly, people drop the training budget and everything else. And I know you and I have had long conversations about this, and we've. Again, I suppose one of the ways we've had to innovate, as you mentioned, you've been doing this now digitally and via Zoom as we're doing now, is that, look, whatever way you used to look at it in the past, getting together in offices is a big commitment of time. It's, it can be expensive as well, just to get people out of the office and to travel and all the other things, other than your very worthy fee as well in terms of there. And actually, what we're trying to do today, as many people are, I think, is give people more access in a bit of a Netflixy style, aren't we, Julian? To make it more accessible when they need it, on whatever device they need it, and dealing with the issues of the day in a really topical and updated fashion.
Yeah, that's spot on, and I think it's really interesting when you back in the day, I used to go to many conferences as you did yourself, and it was interesting the sort of plethora of stalls. It was all about, it seemed to be all about tech and gadgetry and software and, all that sort of hard sort of stuff, and very little about skill development. And I think it's quite interesting that a number of companies that I've interacted with in the property world are guilty of huge investments in the tech side of things, but which obviously is essential and creates opportunities, but then they don't train the staff to handle those opportunities and turn them into business. And I think it's there's a famous quote by a guy called Will Rogers who said, if companies spent the same amount of money on improving their services as they did on advertising them, then they wouldn't have to advertise them. And I think that's a really interesting quote, because my experience as a grumpy old man these days, whether it be remotely or in person, is the service I receive in all sorts of sectors is disappointing and not what I would expect. But the interesting thing is, those companies involved have spent huge amounts of money hooking me in the first place, and then the actual experience, because of the human beings that interact with me, is substandard. So I won't go back, and I think unfortunately there's a lot of that in estate agency. So yeah, we've I'm not sure I like the word pivot. I think I'm a bit old for pivoting. I put me back out if I do too much of that. But yeah, we're now delivering high quality training via Zoom predominantly, and it's going down fantastically well. I have to say, it's more flexible, it's cheaper, because people, as you rightly say, haven't got to hire conference rooms, that staff haven't got to drive or get trains to places, and a lot of it they can record and re-watch or watch for the first time at a time that suits them. And of course, you know, as we may mention at some point, we've worked together with Kerfuffle to start to create a library of resources that that I think are going to will tick a lot of boxes on the training side of things.
Yeah, very exciting. And the main one, of course, Julian, it's not just the chosen few who are sent along to the training session. Everyone in the business can consume this training, can't they, as well, which is fantastic. So that's really good. Yeah, I think it's really good. I think absolutely what you say there. You know, people do judge, and it's not just judging against competitor agents, is it? Actually, you're being judged a bit against customer service just in general out there. So if somebody in a different sector is actually delivering something well, and you let that down just by not answering the phone or not dealing with it in a sprightly fashion, then that's an issue. And I think the key thing for me is it's almost like there's no second chances these days, isn't there? You know, you really need to take that, seize that moment, deal with it there and then, because otherwise they're just not coming back.
Well, you know, one of the again, cliches are cliches for a reason. They're cliches because they've been around and stood the test of time. And one of the classic training cliches is you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Everyone will have heard that before. That's nothing new, but it's true. And the bottom line is, if you don't deal with somebody in the right way, and you know, let's talk about the real nuts and bolts of estate agency. Stock is where it begins and ends, and it's all very well attracting inquiries, etc. But if I played you some of the calls that we've been hearing over the last 12 months in lockdown and out of lockdown, where customers have been dealt with in such a haphazard, shoddy fashion. I mean, the classics are things like you know, fee inquiries, for example, a potential vendor phoning in saying how much you charge for selling. Well, a great agent will turn that into a valuation. In fact, a great agent will turn that into a valuation where perhaps they're the only agent to be called out because they handle that fee inquiry in such a brilliant fashion. But if I played you some of the calls that we've recorded on mystery shopping exercises, it would make your hair curl. I mean, it makes my hair curl, and that's saying something. You know, just the real horrific stuff whereby that fee inquiry is a million miles away from being dealt with in the right way. And that's just one little snapshot. But, you know, again, interesting how companies will invest in marketing, invest in social media activity, invest in branding and all sorts of things to get that phone call coming in from someone who's got that agent on their radar as being an agent they might use to sell their property, and then it goes no further because the human being doesn't deal with it in the right way. And that's where I think we need the balance between you know, tech and training, really, you know, those two things together.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, well, I couldn't agree with any more of that. And so I'm delighted to say today you've got a plan, haven't you? So this is helpful for people like my good self here. You've summarised what you feel is really a series of steps, best practice to help you out. And it's fair to say we're looking at this now in this, what are we, in the third lockdown period. But actually, this is just good. A lot of this is just great best practice anyway, isn't it, in terms of...
Entirely, yeah. I mean, again, obviously things are different in a lockdown scenario in the way certain things are done. That's completely understandable. But best practice is best practice. And what we've done, and we actually piloted this quietly in the first lockdown, just with a handful of selected clients, the concept of having this plan. And it's quite neat and tidy having this plan, because the plan is 4 things which begin with the letters PLAN. You know, life doesn't always work out as neatly and tidily as that sometimes, but the plan is PLAN, plan, and that helps agents remember what those 4 points are, and then obviously to put them into practice. So we did it under the radar. You know, there were a number of people came out in the first lockdown to tell agents how to run their business, and I sort of sat back and played a bit of a waiting game, because I thought, well, I haven't got a big enough ego to tell agents how to run their business in a pandemic, because actually I've never been in one, and yes, I've run an estate agency, was a partner of an award-winning estate agency for many years, but I hadn't worked in a pandemic, and I didn't have the ego to stand there or sit there and say this is what you should be doing. So I kind of spoke to clients quietly and kept my powder dry to an extent. But now I think we've learned lots of lessons, and thankfully the points that we covered in the plan, the very first version of the plan, I've had great feedback from our client firms who said, yeah, it got them through that very difficult period last year, and the things that they did then, they're still doing to make them successful now. So as ever, this plan has evolved, and it's valid for, you know, today, but no doubt it will evolve as the weeks and months go by, and it's something that, you know, agents can add to or tweak as they go. But yeah, 4 component parts: and they are protect,
Yep.
lead, assess, and new techniques and new practices. So protect, lead, assess, new techniques, new practice, PLAN. And that's basically what I wanted to talk about today, really, in kind of that order, you know.
Well, first things first, of course, as you said, on the ego point, don't worry, I've got that baton. I'll run with that. Quite happy to tell people how to run their business after having no experience myself. Secondly, it passes the Simon Whale test because I can remember plan. Sometimes you come up with these acronyms or whatever they're called, aren't they? And it's harder to remember the actual thing than it is to come up with it. But it's very simple, very concise. But obviously, we had a brief conversation about it beforehand, but this is the first time I'm hearing it, so if you don't mind me just quizzing you on a couple of the things. So the final part of the plan is the N, isn't it?
The N. The N is for new practices. Fairly obviously, it's always good to move forward and change the way you're doing things and what have you. We've talked about a few of these, I guess, as we've gone through. Virtual viewings, again, not everyone's a fan of those, but I think they're a hugely important part of the process now. A time saver, a quality control element, etc., etc. Nobody, again, I'm sure I'll be shot down in flames and somebody will pipe up and tell me they're different. I can't imagine anybody, or certainly very few people, actually committing to buy a house from a virtual viewing alone. So we're not saying it replaces physical viewings, but what it does, I suspect, is weed out an awful lot of unnecessary physical viewings, which has got to be a great time management tool. And of course, back to that initial idea of protecting your customers, protecting your clients, protecting your staff, and not having people going around willy-nilly. I mean, even just this week, I think on the day after lockdown, somebody was inquiring on one of the trade press forums that they've got an open house booked and 15 people coming around in a couple of hours. Should they still do it? Well, I think there's an easy answer to that personally, and that's no. But there we go.
We've had a couple of them on recently. So the likes of Gavel, there's UC Homes, who are two very innovative kind of ones there. I think the lovely thing about this as well, Julian, is certainly in the case of UC Homes, they've got a 3-month trial. It's a proper suck it and see scenario, isn't it? You need something now anyway. Why don't you see if he's going to be part of your kit bag going forwards?
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and why wouldn't you have a 3-month trial or something? It's great. But I think some of the new practices that agents are adopting and have been adopting, in fairness, for a while via the training is, we train a very stringent but very effective applicant qualification approach, which is called the MAN principle. It's been around a while. It's not a new idea, but it's alien to a number of agents. Pretty much the majority of agents, when I ask them if they've heard of it, say no. I mean, I did a webinar for Rightmove 18 months or so ago and asked the question of 500 people tuning in, have you heard of the MAN principle? And only 11% had. So I suspect it's new to the majority. It may be new to some of the people tuning in if you want to inquire about it. But the concept is basically that you are going to do exactly what the situation currently dictates, which is to fully qualify and accurately qualify your prospects before you invest time in them. And it's based on this concept of the MAN principle, which is motivation, ability, and needs, and fully understanding that. And obviously, an element of that under ability is their financial capability, which again, so a lot of what we do is about training staff on how to get a mortgage advisor conversation agreed with that applicant. And again, that's easy if you do it in the right way. It really is. It's too many agents do it in a clunky, clumsy, poorly timed way, which is literally, would you like to speak to our advisor? And of course the barriers go up, and there's a much more skillful way of doing it. So again, too big a subject to talk about here, but it's investing in the skills that you need the staff to adopt to raise standards in dealing with customers and clients in a new way. And it will be brand new for some of them. So to be fair, for some, it might be going back, almost like a Back to the Future scenario, where you're going back to things that made you successful in the first place, which perhaps have slipped. But those, again, I don't want to necessarily over promote them, but for me, if I was back to owning an estate agency and somebody said to me, here's a library of bite-sized training videos that your staff can watch, which are going to cover off the absolute best practice principles, nice, short, sharp, no flab, real punchy stuff, and you can access those via kerfuffle, you know, to me it would be a no-brainer. And I've piloted a few of the raw versions of those with some of my friends and acquaintances within the industry, and I have had great feedback. So yes, I'm biased.
I'm biased. They're fantastic. You know, they genuinely are. We've seen feedback. They're exactly what people are after these days, as you said. Bite size, hyper relevant. You know, no, what do they call it? No fluff or anything else around there. It's really concise. So we'd look at anyone who's interested. Yeah, please do get in contact. We'd love to get your feedback and tell us what you think of them, because I think they're fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah, and what it allows you to do, whether you use that or any other method, or you train them yourself, if they're fully qualifying the applicants, what you will end up with is a clear picture of who the must-move applicants are. We talked about vendors earlier on, but you've got your must-move applicants and your might-move applicants. And again, the focus very clearly is going to be on the must-move people, because they need to move. So it is as simple as thinking, right, I've got a batch of must-move vendors, a batch of must-move applicants. You know, that's where I want to spend the lion's share of my time, because if you don't do that, you will be a busy fool, because you can charge around all day doing stuff and end up with no results. So that's, again, something I think to think about. And going forward, other things that agents have done, which again they perhaps got out of the habit of doing, is if you end up with a batch of must-move people, there are sometimes some less obvious opportunities in there, like swap opportunities. Yeah. So, for example, you've got two applicants, vendors, whatever. Where it works particularly well is if you've got somebody looking locally to move up market and somebody else looking locally to move down market. What we've found through our training and through what I used to do in our estate agency is that the down market movers are the key, because they tend to be less fussy about the property they're buying. Very often they're driven financially to move down market. So their goal, if you like, their problem that they're solving by moving is to sort themselves out financially. So if you offer them the opportunity that Mr. and Mrs. Jennings want to buy, you know, interested subject to sale in your property, they happen to have a 3-bed semi compared to your 4-bed detached, there may be an opportunity to do a swap there. And what I used to love about swap deals is that they very rarely went wrong, because of course if you pulled out of your purchase you were losing simultaneously your buyer. So it's kind of and even on occasions you know, there might be opportunities for, you know, for sort of three-way sales and purchases as well, if you're focusing on those individuals within the local community who are must-move people. You can very definitely winkle out some opportunities there, I think.
Excellent. I mean, there's some really good stuff in there, and I think you're right. You know, the whole point about looking at you know, new practices, best practices going forwards, the change there. The really key thing as well, though, just like I was talking about before, it's really important to find that Goldilocks zone, because you know there are only so many spinning plates essentially you can adopt at any one time. We both know we've both been lucky enough to have and work with Romans as a client there, and I think they as an agency, certainly in their pomp, were so just almost Apple-esque focus, wasn't it? You famously, Apple turn away more good ideas than they actually adopt. But by doing that, they made sure that they happened and they got through, rather than like so many of us, and I'm the worst for it, you know, 6 or 7 spinning plates and none of them ever getting finished.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's a simple business. It's, you know, it really is. It's overcomplicated by some people, but it is a simple business. And if you are doing a great job with your vendors and looking, you know, getting them on in the first place, looking after them, etc., keeping them loyal to you, particularly at the moment, you know, speaking to them, making sure they know you're on board, making sure they know you're still open, and you know that you are still there trying to sell their house in the current circumstances. That yes, things might be more challenging because some people won't want to go and view, etc., So making sure their expectations are sorted, but sort out what you're doing with them, and on the other hand, deal with your applicants in the right way. You know, even down to the fact that, and again, this may not be new for some people, but it's definitely new to others. Do you really know the bottom line of each vendor? So you've got your must-move vendors. Have you said to them, look, if I were in the current scenario, which may last, you know, we may have a 6-week lockdown or 6-month lockdown, who the heck knows, but if I were to find a cash buyer that could go ahead quickly and buy your property, what do you think your bottom line might be for someone like that? And really truly understanding that, yes, the house is on the market at X, but if you presented them with an absolutely fantastic hot buyer, they would be flexible to the tune of Y. Then you now know that that property, instead of needing to achieve that figure, there's flexibility. Simultaneously, you're talking to your applicants and saying, look, obviously, in certain parts of the country, supply is a little difficult at the moment, etc. If I were to find something for you and it ticked all your boxes, what do you think the very most you'd be prepared to go to would be? Because, by the way, that's a very different figure to what's your budget or how much do you want to spend. So understanding what I used to call the stretch to figure. Suddenly you've got an applicant on your books looking up to this figure and a vendor on the market at this. But by asking those two questions, suddenly you've got that scenario and there's a deal that you've created just by proper practice and best practice, and maybe a new way or new questions that you factored into your approach. Again, I don't want to preach to converted. I know some of the agents I train are doing that already, but it's just something to think about because it's about making business happen.
Excellent, and being proactive about it, isn't it? That's the key point to it. Absolutely fantastic, Julie. So we've got plan, haven't we? So a really nice, easy to implement, although there's nothing intrinsically difficult in there, is there? But you do need to just have the regiment to sit down and make sure you follow it. That's the key to all of these things, isn't it? Turning them into habits, isn't it?
Well, I think the best, the best things in life are simple, aren't they? Much like you and myself, Simon. But
it's got the name.
We don't overcomplicate things at Marvelous Training Solutions. As I say, I think estate agents is a simple business. I think it's still inherently a people business. And the plan for lockdown 3.0, protect, lead, assess, and new ideas. That's something that we would recommend. And obviously, in the confines of an event like this or a meeting like this, conversation like this, it's difficult maybe to get everything across. And if anybody wants to have a conversation separately, obviously very, very happy to do so.
Absolutely great. Well, look, what a fantastic sort of structure you've given there, people, right at the start of the year to do it. As we've said, great for lockdown there, but this can be implemented anytime, can't it? And carried out there. So I think that, well, to use your phrase, marvellous, obviously, absolutely fantastic feedback. Once again, I just want to say, obviously, very, very excited working with you, and I encourage everyone to get in contact and talk. Obviously, the great man himself is available for gigs, as I always talk about. He's the James Brown of training. You're still here in a Zoom form, aren't you? And as he said, and we've got the digital now, so there's no excuse at all, is there, Julian, for one of the others, obviously, to be able to have training for not just yourself these days, but all your staff. And that's what I think is most exciting about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We cover everything. So yeah, anybody that feels they have any training needs, we will be able to deliver some form of solution without a doubt.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, absolutely great. Thanks very much for looking so resplendent today. Absolutely marvellous in there to be talking about. We'll look forward to some more of these over the coming weeks and months. Thank you, Julian.
Yeah, top man. Thanks for your time, Simon. Nice to see you. And just go for a dip in the sea and enjoy your afternoon.
Cheers, matey. Thank you.
Cheers.
That was Julian O'Dell, our man with a plan. Tune in next time, kerfufflers.